Hello Ratbags, it's Jade Plays Games. Welcome to another Fallout 76 discussion video. You guys went absolutely ham talking to me about Fallout 76, correcting me, telling me I was wrong. I absolutely love that stuff. I love having a discussion about stuff. Lots and lots of you 76 fans out there that think this game is going to be a single player. I still think you're very wrong. However, I do want to discuss all the rumours, all the leaks, all the information, and try and cut across some of the bullshit. And also talk about why Fallout fans are so salty over an actual multiplayer being added to the game. Whether or not the game has got a full multiplayer set, like maybe something like Rust, where it's up to 70, 60 players, or whether it's going to be something maybe a little bit smaller like 7 Days to Die, where you can only have 4 or 5 players. Regardless, the reaction from the hardcore Fallout fans has probably been quite negative. And I didn't realise this when I made my video. I was looking at it clearly as a point of view from a survival games and early access coverage gamer. That's what I do. That's my channel if you don't know, if this is the first time you watch. So I was hyped and excited. My angle was purely about what if a real AAA publisher made a survival game, in opposed to all these other small independent games that do fantastic jobs, innovate, but always lack that final bit of polish. So, come with me as we discuss everything there is to know about 76. We're also going to revisit some of them rumours and hopefully give you some more information. And I'm going to reaffirm that I still think this game is going to be an online survival game. And why that isn't a bad thing. I'm hopefully going to convince you, the Fallout faithful, them salty Fallout people that have been tapping away at Reddit, on Twitter, on 4chan, going absolute batshit crazy. I want to convince you that it's not such a bad thing if this game does have online capabilities. Okay, so there's loads of coverage on it. It's absolutely saturated already. I can't believe how many channels have picked up on it. All these Fallout channels that have probably been dead for about a year and a half now because they've run out of mods to cover have all of a sudden just gone, woohoo, Fallout info, let's go. It's fantastic to see. I'm in the same boat with Ark Survival Evolved. It happens. When you cover one game completely, it really makes your channel come alive when there's brand new information. But that doesn't mean I can't cover it. I have covered games news for a good few years now, and I cover all sorts of game news. Not just survival games, but all sorts of early access information and brand new stuff that's coming. And you know what? I have covered Fallout. Just literally no one ever watched it. This was 2 years ago, before I hit Ark Survival Evolved, before my channel started growing bigger. I only had around 300 subs, but I was into Fallout 4 for a little while. I was making guides on it, I was doing Let's Plays. I like the Fallout series. I'm not a Fallout fan, and I think that makes me the perfect person to take a look at this stuff, because I'm not going to be prejudiced. I'm not going to be taking a look and going, oh, I wish they had just single player, I wish they just had this. I am looking at it from a fresh pair of eyes, almost. I found Fallout 4 quite boring and repetitive after a while. I never really played Fallout 3, and out with all the Bethesda games, it's Skyrim that is my jam. But where do we start? Well, let's go through some of the information that's been gained from these news outlets. They don't generally speculate too much. They will generally only pop and put in what has actually been said by the devs. And some of you guys in the comment section said I should only be reporting on what that happens. Well, quite frankly, that's boring as shit. You might as well just read these GameSpot articles and get nothing else. Opinion is what's really important, and especially if you've got an opinion about Fallout 76, let me know. But anyway, lots of things in here. It is coming to Xbox One, the PS4 and PC. It is set before all the other Fallout games, but it may not be the dates that were shown in the actual game. There seems to be a little bit of a disparity between some of them. Now, who's developing? Now, this is hopefully where I'm going to give you some extra background information. According to them, it is Maryland Studios, and you guys were quick to point out there's different studios, and generally they don't touch multiplayer. But that's not strictly true. Fallout 4 has toyed with it. In fact, all Bethesda games have toyed with the idea of multiplayer. They've always put it into an alpha, or they've developed it alongside the main game. However, 9 times out of 10, clearly, they've not actually ever implemented it. They've said it just didn't gel or it didn't fit at the time. Which brings us on to this, Battlecry. Announced in 2015, this was going to be a tactical multiplayer eccentric combat game where you would be in a team of players and you'd go and take on another team. It seems a bit generalistic, but that's all I could really gather from the information when it launched. It did get cancelled. When looking at the actual gameplay of it, you can see maybe why. Although at the time, 4 years ago nearly, 3.5 years ago, when it was just maybe being announced, it seemed okay. It seemed like another take on this sort of tactical matchmaking player versus player combat game. But they didn't obviously want to waste that studio. That studio didn't just get sold off. They didn't just fire all the staff. They folded that company that they bought to work on it into their own. They didn't give them a proper name, you know, like where they called it Bethesda Maryland or Bethesda this or Bethesda that. They simply just folded the company into other areas. So, Battlecry, a multiplayer game being developed by a studio, got cancelled. You've got this spare development team floating around. What are they working on? They didn't work on Fallout 4 because there was no online component, or did they? Maybe they were the ones that were actually alpha testing the online multiplayer. Now, speculation alert, just a bit, but what if that carried on? What if the alpha from multiplayer from Fallout 4 expanded and got bigger and bigger? What if Bethesda's game studios looked at the popularity of survival games, which is huge? People don't underestimate what survival genre does. 400 million sales last year alone. It would be absolutely stupid of a studio like Bethesda not to take a look at getting some piece of the pie. They've already done that in the MMO stage with Elder Scrolls Online, and some of you were quick to point out that was developed by ZeniMax, but ultimately they're still all owned by the publisher Bethesda. So of course they're looking at their pie from all different angles. You've got different games. You've got things like Doom being rebooted, that was really successful. You've got Wolfenstein, that has been good stuff. Some lesser successful stuff. Dishonored 2 didn't really fall into place as they wanted it to. And the same goes for Prey, which didn't really set the world on fire. So Bethesda need to look elsewhere. They have made plenty of single player experiences and they're not going to stop making them side games, but I think it's time, I think it's right that they try something fresh and new. Do you really think they can keep crafting single player games? We've heard the experiences and the battles and the arguments. God of War re-established single player games as the ultimate life form in gaming. No, it didn't. Of course, it did prove to be a runaway success, and it did show that single player games can be successful. However, that is few and far between nowadays. All games want to put some sort of online eccentric stuff in it. Online is where it's at. Now, single player games can be made, and I'm all for single player games. And I'm for not 1 second saying that Fallout should always be online games before anyone jumps down me. But you've had it. You've had your single player games, Fallout fans. And you know what? You didn't even like the last one. Now, I'm not making this video to bait Fallout fans, but I do want to challenge what you think and hold dear. Because I hopefully think that's going to generate conversation and make you actually a little bit more willing to accept that there is multiplayer. Fallout 4, 84 on the Metascore credits, 5.5 on the user score. We can take a look at Fallout 3, 91 on the critics and 7.9 on the user score. Now it has to be said that they have half the ratings in terms of overall people that actually rating this than Fallout 4. But not the critics. The critics more so reviewed Fallout 3 than this, according to Metacritic. Now, Metacritic isn't the bestest gauge of all time, but I do take into account a lot of the user scores, and I think that's important. And something that I've followed, because I follow game news religiously. I read pretty much every single gaming outlet every single day. That's why I do game news. Fallout 4 was considered a little bit of a fail. It just didn't push the boat enough. It was a competent revamp. It was a competent way of getting a Fallout game on the brand new generation of consoles. But it didn't set the world alight. It was crazy. It was hype because it was a Bethesda and because it was a Fallout branded game. But even New Vegas, which is usually derided as one of the worst Fallout games, is actually beating it in both. Well, alright, it's 84 the same. But look at that user score. So I think that tells you something about Fallout fans. They don't like anything new. Fallout New Vegas at the time was lauded up as like, what is this? This isn't what we're expecting. We want to carry on our journey in where Fallout 3 was set. And the fact that Fallout New Vegas was made by a different studio, that also didn't help. But over time, people's criticisms of this game have softened and have come to realise that it's actually a really good game. Can the same be said for Fallout 4? I really felt like Fallout 4 didn't push its limits. It done a competent job of getting something on the brand new console to make some money, but really didn't go far enough in doing something new. It had base building, sure, but it was optional. You could play the whole game without pretty much ever building a base. Everything else looked a little bit prettier and everything else worked a little bit better. But it was missing real core aspects, some real decent storylines that a lot of people said were missing. So, you get my point. I'm not ragging just on Fallout 4 for the point. So you get my point. I'm not ragging on Fallout 4 just for the fun of it. But what I'm saying is this, that you've had lots of single player games in the Fallout universe. And the last one to come out so far has not been actually reviewed that well. So why would you not want to try something different so that you don't keep making something very stale, very boring, very samey? If you remember Doom and the way that they went down the road, they tried doing something a bit different and it didn't necessarily pan out. Before the highly lauded Doom reboot came along, we of course had Doom 3, which really tanked. So change definitely isn't always good, but you still have to try stuff, especially if the last game you put out wasn't that well received in terms of critical. Now, do you think Bethesda really care that much? Maybe some of the people that make the actual game do, but as a publisher they want to make as much money as possible. And you can bet that even the game developers of course have talked about multiplayer in the past, so why not give it a go? So there you go, that is my defence of multiplayer, why I think multiplayer should be in the game and why it needs to be. It's got to be pointed out that it's been heavily reported as well that there will still be story missions, there will still be some sort of campaign in this game. It's going to be a role-playing game still at its heart. Next question is the biggest one probably, is it going to be like Rust or is it going to be something like 7 Days to Die? I've even heard people comparing it might be something like Ark, and this is where other people really start to get upset about the fact it might be a true survival game. One of the best features from Fallout New Vegas was the fact they added a hardcore mode which allowed you to eat and sleep and need water. It was a really hardcore game mode, hence why it's called hardcore game. But that's what survival games are, they are hardcore. They're not here to pander to the easy, to the kids. It's to them young adults that want to play something really hardcore. It's them older gamers that want something a bit more challenging. Now a lot has been said about the report from Kotaku saying that he backtracked or he went back on what he originally reported, and that is absolute bullshit. Lots of you have been posting links to this saying, putting it in my face that he's backtracked on what he said. He hasn't backtracked on what he said at all. I think you guys are just reading into what you want to read. What he did backtrack on was saying that he mistakenly said you guys might be disappointed. He didn't want to be negative against the Fallout fans. He didn't want to say that you're going to not like the game, but that's what he backtracked on. So this idea that the source, the main source of all this information about Fallout 76 being an online survival game that would be something like Rust, is still there, and I still go with this guy. Do you know why? Because he has broke every major games league in the past few years. The important ones for the industry. Now if you play and cover games like I do, that is really important. Whereas some of you guys would be like, shut the fuck up and get on talking about Fallout 76. But you've got to take a moment. He leaked all of Fallout 4's first details a couple of years before the game even came out. He even had transcripts of the opening scenes. Time and time again he has reported on stuff, and there are a few occasions where I've not agreed with him, and there are a few occasions where I think he's had his own agenda in reporting on games companies. So I hold true, I still think it's going to be an online eccentric game. Now I do want it to be like Rust. I don't care if it's a carbon copy. If it's open world survival in the Fallout 4 wastelands where you can have up to 30 or 40 players, that would be amazing. Maybe it's not going to be the full wholesale thing where you destroy people's bases. I certainly don't want a time sink like Ark Survival Evolved where your life becomes enveloped in just being on PvP servers. But there are other games that do it better. Conan Exiles has implemented a time restricted PvP mode. Even Elder Scrolls Online has their PvP segated and put into a certain area where you just go and fight over control. If it's something like that, that would be great. I would take that gladly, as long as there is that interaction with other players that you could randomly come across. What I don't want it to be is a 7 Days to Die rip-off, or like State of Decay. And there's a few things to point out why it's going to be a bigger online game. But we'll get through some of the retractions. You guys have been telling me that the engine can't cope with a multiplayer game, that lots of the modders that utilise this are saying that it's just not possible. Well, then modders might be in for a nasty surprise. According to some reports, they're saying that there will be no modding allowed unless it goes through the Creation Club. Now this is something that's probably going to be happening anyway. Bethesda for a long time have allowed mods and have extended their games beyond measure. Skyrim, all the previous Fallout other games that have had mods, they've all made them games bigger and better than they ever were. However, Bethesda as a publisher wants to milk that money, and they did that with launching the community mods on Skyrim last year. They were overpriced, you got little content, it really just wasn't worth it. And even worse, the modders that make these, that put it through the community creation kit, only received a tiny fraction. So I fully expect the modders to sit around and say that it doesn't work, it's not going to work with the engine. But let's face it, these are modders. They may have real fantastic knowledge, but they don't work for the company. Every games engine out there, every year after year after year, gets iterated. It's never exactly the same one. We all take the piss out of Call of Duty saying they're still using the same engine from 12 years ago. They are, but of course they're not. They're editing that every single year. They're changing that every single year to make it better, to get more fidelity, to get the graphics looking better, to make things run better. And that is no different for Fallout. No doubt about it, online worlds like this are intensive. They need a lot of computing power. To stop lag, to stop desync, to stop just all sorts of nastiness that you find in Ark Survival Evolved and other games like that, you really do need a really tight, good, well-working engine. But that's why I'm so excited about Fallout and about Bethesda actually doing it, because they've got the power, they've got the nous, they've got the experience to make it better than them other games. A few other things to note as well. The title is based on Fallout 76, which had 500 players. Well, players, there you go, I've spoiled it already. 500 people put into the vault with no controls, no tests put on them. That to me signifies that it's just going to be 500 players running around the map. I mean, it's not going to be that many, but can you imagine if it was? Can you imagine if they had revolutionised and put it out there? Apart from some really crappy MMOs and some really basic games out there, you never really get more than 60 or 70 players on a game server. So having a fully fledged first person open world survival game that could have hundreds of players on it would blow my mind. But when you boil it down, when you look into it, 500 people were in that vault. What if it isn't 500 then? Maybe some of them died over time, maybe something happened, maybe it's been whittled down to just 60. The trailer obviously shows just one person in the reclamation area, maybe coming out with it 20 years after Reclamation Day was meant to happen, or maybe he's just been making it a base of these for a long time. But the idea, the trailer, reclaim the land, that signifies to me a PvP experience. That signifies to me an online survival game. There is nothing wrong in this game being an online survival game. Overall, Fallout has had its time as a single player game. Considering normally they rotate and we get like a Fallout game, then we get a Skyrim game, and then we get fillers in between that sometimes like Doom, etc. It is a bit odd that they're releasing another Fallout game so soon. Really, it's only 3 years after the last one. So it does need to be different, it does need to be interesting, and it does need to be unique. If it's just another single player game that maybe has a couple co-op slots, I don't think that's pushing the boat out enough, and I really hope it isn't. So, a few other things to contemplate. Will the game be coming out literally in 2 weeks' time? The Fallout 76 documentary is coming. It's not really just the Fallout 76. It's in 2 parts. It's going to be based on the history of Fallout games, and then the second part is going to be covering that 76. Supposedly it's coming out on June the 12th, and that's when E3 starts. It's also the day where most games come out on a Tuesday. So I don't think necessarily we're going to see a release date of June the 12th. I do think we're going to see the first part of the documentary, and then the second part will come out when the main game is ready to come out. Obviously we'll find out on June the 10th when they have their big reveal. There's obviously going to be taking a look at Rage 2, and that's another question or query that makes me think it's not going to be just a bog standard single player game. Rage 2 is a post-apocalyptic world. It is a single player game. It's got all the little ticks you need if you're a big fan of that sort of game. So you're not going to release a game that's exactly like that, or has very similar components. So are they really releasing a trailer for a game that might not come out until next year? Until 2019 in the winter time? I don't think that's true either. I honestly think this game is going to come out this summer. So I'm going to finish off going back to what I said about trying to convince the Fallout hardcore that this isn't such a bad idea and it's not such a bad thing. I know you're apprehensive about the fact that it may be something like Rust or Ark. You don't want it to be a grind. You don't want it to be toxic. I think Bethesda are probably in the best place to do that. They've looked at what made Elder Scrolls Online successful, and actually, if you don't believe me, Elder Scrolls Online is really successful now. That had a troubled development, it didn't launch very well, and it received quite negative stuff for a good number of years. But in the last 18 months it's transformed that, and it is now regarded as one of the better MMOs out there. Thank God Fallout 76 isn't an MMO as far as we know. That would be the worst. it definitely needs to be a survival game for me. It definitely needs to have that aspects that you could come across random players, help each other or hinder each other. Maybe not fully on destroying each other's bases and laying siege, but the thought of me building a base with Vault-Tec items, with all the technology you saw in Fallout 4, that kind of makes me a bit excited though. What could you build? What kind of base defenses could you construct? What ingenious ways could you make traps to stop people getting in? There's always that little bit of me that's PvP that wants to just be a little bit of a shit and go after people and kill them and take all their stuff. I've never really found that enough in Ark. It takes too long and it's too grindy, and it just evolves about being part of a huge tribe. Conan Exiles is nearly there, but that's still a little bit buggy, and the game's a little bit empty and a little bit wooden. And Rust is so toxic, I don't know if I can handle. So I really want this to be a survival game, and I'm going to carry on doing videos like this. Any more information, I'll carry on talking about it. I'll try and give you impassionately what is actually there, but I'll also always give you my opinion, because that is what my channel is based on. I always give game news on the games that I like and cover, but I always say always add my own little thoughts and feelings. If you don't like that, that's fair enough. Don't worry. Jog hell on, get back in your vault, wait until Fallout 5 comes out so you can play it just on your own. But if you're excited, like me, at the thought of a big open world survival game set in the Fallout universe, make sure you like that button. Make sure you're subscribed and comment down below. Keep it clean. Disagree with me, but give me some different answers. Don't just show me links to every single other video I've seen already. Give me your opinion. Tell me why you think it's not going to be something like what I've been talking about. Or tell me why you think I'm bang on the money and why you'd be excited for playing this game. I'm Joe Plays Games. I'll see you ratbags later.